Era dentro. Hi guys, my name is Criado and this is Interesting Random Facts Academy History, and today we're going to talk about our third episode of the history of World Cups, but today is different. We're not going to talk about a World Cup or another World Cup. No, we're going to talk about the 1950 World Cup, okay? The after World War II World Cup. So before we get started, see that button? Yeah, subscribe button. Click the subscribe button, because after you click the subscribe button, you're going to be a new subscriber to Interesting Random Facts Academy. So without further ado, let's begin. So on 1938, before the 1938 World Cup, the FIFA already wanted to make another World Cup, and they were already thinking of which country was going to host the 1942 World Cup. And the volunteers of the host countries were Argentina, Brazil, and Germany. Unfortunately, on 1939, when Julius Rimet was having his trip to Brazil, he heard an unfortunately news that Germany had invaded Poland. And many historians say that he was in Rio de Janeiro at that time when he heard the news. Thus, the 1942 World Cup had to be cancelled due to World War II that was there from 1939 to 1945. Then, on July 25, 1946, the FIFA had a meeting where they decided to claim three things. First of all was that the next World Cup was going to be held in 1950 in Brazil. And another thing was that the trophy that the World Cup winners received at that time, it didn't have a name. But in that meeting, they decided to name Julius Rimet, since Julius Rimet was taking the charge of FIFA president for 25 years at that time, and so decided to rename Julius Rimet. Another thing that they decided in this meeting was that countries like Germany and Japan wouldn't be allowed to participate in this World Cup due to World War II. They almost excluded Italy, but because there was one FIFA manager that was from Italy, they decided to not prohibit Italy from participating in the 1950 World Cup. Speaking of Italy, their team wasn't as great as they were in 1938 and 1934, and this was mostly due to an airplane crash that killed most of their Italian players, known as the Tragedy of Superga. Now, let's talk about the format and the countries that were playing in the 1950 World Cup. So, much like the 1930 World Cup, the 1950 World Cup had 13 teams as well. Those 13 teams being Brazil, Yugoslavia, Mexico, Switzerland, Chile, Spain, United States, England, Italy, Paraguay, Sweden, Bolivia, and Uruguay were the 13 teams playing in the 1950 World Cup. In Group 1, Brazil won most of the games and was qualified for the next round. Now on Group 2, Spain won all of their games and was qualified for the next round too. Now on Group 3, Sweden won the first game against Italy 3-2. They tied against Paraguay, but still was qualified for the next round. They still got in first place and was qualified for the next round. And now in Group 4, you only had one game. Yeah, there was only one game, and Uruguay defeated Bolivia by 8-0. And they were qualified. What a great group, right? Anyway, different from the 1930 World Cup, the 1950 World Cup had a group stage and not a semi-final. And in this group stage, the two best teams would qualify to the World Cup final and would play against each other in the World Cup final. And those, Brazil, Sweden, Spain, they all had to play against each other. Brazil won their game against Sweden 7-1, and they won their second game against Spain 6-1. And Uruguay, they tied the first game against Spain 2-2. Then they won against Sweden by 3-2, scoring a goal almost in the last minute of the game. So they won against Sweden, And then Spain could have just won against Sweden. Then they'll have to go into another game where Uruguay was going to play against Spain. But Sweden won against Spain 3-1, and thus the World Cup final was confirmed to be Uruguay versus Brazil. Brazil was 99% favored to win their game against Uruguay and become the new World Cup champion. Not only they played all of the 4 World Cups at that time, but they were also at home against Uruguay with their own fans at their stadium. So they were favored to win, that's for sure. But historically speaking, Uruguay was playing their second final, whereas Brazil was just the new noob country playing the World Cup final for the first time. So, talking about the game itself, right before the match started between Brazil and Uruguay, the mayor from Rio de Janeiro, Angelo Mendes de Moraes, basically announced to everyone that we're already a World Cup champion. So, a tie will make Brazil a champion. Now for Uruguay, it was only a win that mattered to them. With the whole stadium full of people, Brazil was playing with their fans. And by that, they scored the first goal in the minute 2 of the second half with Friaza. Thus, Brazil was winning by 1-0 against Uruguay. On the minute 21 of the second half, Scafano tied 1-1 Uruguay and Brazil. Thus, in the minute 34 in the second half, Julius Rimet was already getting out of the benches and bring the trophy to Brazil right there next to the field when Brilha scored 2-1 Uruguay. Thus, Uruguay was that time winning the World Cup. And the game was, the time was passing, Brazil was trying to react, and the game was over. With Brazil basically wasting their greatest chance of winning a World Cup at that time. For Uruguay, it was another day of glory. For Brazil, a huge disappointment. The impossible happened with Uruguay becoming World Cup champion for their second time in history.